Good morning, gardeners, and welcome to Friday, June 9th. My name is Catherine, and I created a show called Good Morning Gardeners, even though I can't grow green things because I am referring to gardening metaphorically. We're planting the seeds for a better day. We're starting our day by getting in the right mindset to cultivate a better life for ourselves, better communities, and a better world. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And subscribe if you would like to add Good Morning Gardeners to your morning routine. I do my best to wake you up with positive and mentally stimulating ideas, but sometimes I miss things. If you have something to add to the ideas I discuss, please chime in the comment section below. Now, usually this is the part of the show where I share the international observance of the day and explain a little bit about the cause. However, I could not find an international day for today, so I decided to take this opportunity to talk a little bit about why I created this show. I began Good Morning Gardeners on a random weekday morning in May. I had been reading about the dangers of being too inhibited in a book called Psycho-Cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz, and I knew without a shadow of a doubt that I was way too inhibited. One morning, as I was getting ready, I realized I was completely out of new podcasts, videos, or audiobooks to listen to. This was very annoying for me at the time because I had a bad habit of listening to something while I got dressed and prepared my breakfast every day. So because it would have taken too long for me to search up a new podcast, video series, or audiobook to listen to, I prepared my breakfast and ate in silence. And even though I resented it at first, this silence actually gave me the opportunity to think about my day, my work, my life, and everything I wanted to accomplish. And I realized that morning that I had been severely handicapping myself by crowding out my morning thoughts with irrelevant chatter that wasn't relevant to my day, my work, or my life. And I thought, I need to find something to listen to that will help me wake up, but will prompt me to start thinking in ways that are relevant to my life and useful for my work. I searched around a little bit, but I hadn't searched for long when I had the sudden inspiration to create my own morning show. Because I thought, if I have this problem, surely other people have this problem too. If I need to listen to something that gets me centered and focused and fully awake in the morning, some other people might need that too. So, somewhat on a whim, I just sat down in front of my computer and started talking. I sketched out a rough format first, of course. After the introduction, I chit-chat about what's going on with me. Nothing too deep because I imagine you're still waking up at this point. Then I go into the learning moment and the feel-good moments. The goal here is to stimulate your mind with some gentle learning and then cultivate an emotional state that is conducive to productive thought patterns. I had also read in Psycho-Cybernetics that emotions are the soil in which our thoughts and ideas grow. This really resonated with me, especially since I have devalued my own emotional state for most of my life, and it rang true for me. If you feel like you are capable of doing something great, you are much more likely to do something great. And, in case you hadn't guessed it yet, this quote was also a major source of inspiration for the show's title, Good Morning Gardeners. The last segment of the show is called The Focus Moment, and that's when I prompt you to think about something I've spoken about that morning in a way that really relates to you and your life. By this point, I hope that you are fully awake, that the soil in your mind is tilled and damp and ready for some seeds. And then I send you on your way. I release an episode of Good Morning Gardeners every weekday, except for when I go on vacation, of course, at 6 a.m. European time. So if you're on the East Coast of the United States, you will see these episodes as early as midnight. But you should probably be in bed by then. Anyway, this has been our chit-chat moment for today. So let's go ahead and jump into our learning moment. I want to talk about the last chapter of 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel. I recently finished this book, and I have to say that overall, I liked it. I actually previously gave some pretty harsh critique of this book on this show, but I wanted to tell you guys that the last 20 to 30 pages really redeemed it for me. So To provide some context, this book was written for aspiring startup founders with an emphasis on tech startups. The book is titled 0 to 1 because the main idea is that if you create a business or startup that is derived from something someone else has already done, you are not truly adding any value to the world, since you're just copying and pasting what someone else has already thought of. However, if you can create a new kind of business, especially if you can introduce an innovative new technology, then you have created a one business as opposed to a zero business because you have really added something of value to the world. So today we are going to be looking at the conclusion of the book, which is titled Stagnation or Singularity. He writes, if even the most far-sighted founders cannot plan beyond the next 20 to 30 years, is there anything to say about the very distant future? We don't know anything specific, but we can make out the broad contours. Philosopher Nick Bostrom describes 4 possible patterns for the future of humanity. And by the way, this section has 4 graphs, which I will put up on the screen for you. However, if you can't watch today because you're busy doing something else like driving, I will describe these graphs to you verbally, so there's no need for you to look at your phone while driving. The ancients saw all of history as a never-ending alternation between prosperity and ruin. Only recently have people dared to hope that we might permanently escape misfortune, and it's still possible to wonder whether the stability we take for granted will last. So the view that the ancients took is graphed under the title Recurrent Collapse. The x-axis is time and the y-axis is progress. So we are looking at progress over time. And the graph is going up and down again. So the idea here is that humanity will make progress and then collapse, and then make progress again and collapse again, and on forever. However, we usually suppress our doubts. Conventional wisdom seems to assume instead that the whole world will converge toward a plateau of development similar to the life of the richest countries today. In this scenario, the future will look a lot like the present. And now we have a graph titled Plateau. The line steadily trends upward and then levels off to a plateau. Given the interconnected geography of the contemporary world and the unprecedented destructive power of modern weaponry, it's not hard to ask whether a large-scale social disaster could be contained were it to occur. This is what fuels our fears of the third possible scenario, a collapse so devastating that we won't survive it. And the graph here is titled Extinction. We have a line that begins ascending very gradually, suddenly takes off with exponential progress until it reaches a peak and then collapses down to the bottom. The last of the 4 possibilities is the hardest one to imagine, accelerating takeoff toward a much better future. The end result of such a breakthrough could take a number of forms, but any one of them would be so different from the present as to defy description. So the last graph, titled Takeoff, shows what appears to be a flat line, but I'm assuming that this part of the line is trending upward only very slightly in comparison to the extreme increase that we see towards the end of the graph. So after the seemingly straight line, the line suddenly veers upward almost until it is almost completely vertical and does not come back down. And Thiel asks, which of the 4 will it be? Recurrent collapse seems unlikely. The knowledge underlying civilization is so widespread today that complete annihilation would be more probable than a long period of darkness followed by recovery. However, in case of extinction, there is no human future of any kind to consider. If we define the future as a time that looks different from the present, then most people aren't expecting any future at all. Instead, they expect coming decades to bring more globalization, convergence, and sameness. In this scenario, poorer countries will catch up to richer countries, and the world as a whole will reach an economic plateau. But even if a truly globalized plateau were possible, could it last? In the best case, economic competition would be more intense than ever before for every single person and firm on the planet. However, when you add competition to consume scarce resources, it's hard to see how a global plateau could last indefinitely. Without new technology to relieve competitive pressures, stagnation is likely to erupt into conflict. In case of conflict on a global scale, stagnation collapses into extinction. That leaves the fourth scenario, in which we create new technology to make a much better future. The most dramatic version of this outcome is called the singularity, an attempt to name the imagined result of new technology so powerful as to transcend the current limits of our understanding. Ray Kurzweil, the best-known singularitarian, starts from Moore's law and traces exponential growth trends in dozens of fields, confidently projecting a future of superhuman artificial intelligence. According to Kurzweil, the singularity is near. It's inevitable, and all we have to do is prepare ourselves to accept it. But no matter how many trends can be traced, the future won't happen on its own. What the singularity would look like matters less than the stark choice we face today between the two most likely scenarios: nothing or something. It's up to us. We cannot take for granted that the future will be better, and that means we need to work to create it today. Whether we achieve the singularity on a cosmic scale is perhaps less important than whether we seize the unique opportunities we have to do new things in our own working lives. Everything important to us, the universe, the planet, the country, your company, your life, and this very moment, is singular. Our task today is to find singular ways to create the new things that will make the future not just different, but better, to go from 0 to 1. The essential first step is to think for yourself. Only by seeing our world anew, as fresh and strange as it was to the ancients who first saw it, can we recreate and preserve it for the future. I really love the way that Thiel writes about this topic because it seems to me that there is a common thought distortion, and I see it repeated across multiple topics over and over again, that as an average person, all you can do is wait and see what happens. The average person doesn't really have the power to make a difference. If you haven't already watched my episode titled How and Why You Can Make a Difference by Reducing Plastic Use, I explain the logical argument taken from Doing Good Better by William MacAskill about why that perspective doesn't really make sense in that video. I won't delve too deeply into it again today, but as a reminder, this thought distortion is a paradox that can be illustrated by the following two phrases. First, if many people did this thing, then change would happen. But any individual person doesn't make a difference. Feel free to go back and watch that video if you need a refresher, but basically the gist that we take away from Doing Good Better is that every single person does make a difference in a way, and you never know when your actions might be the tipping point for real change. So, for our feel-good moment today, I want to go back into 0 to 1 and just read the last part of Thiel's chapter on founders. Now, this paragraph that I'm going to read here will probably seem to start out somewhat counterintuitively to my argument here, but stick with me and just remember that Thiel is addressing people who want to be the next Steve Jobs or Elon Musk. He is not talking to people who think of themselves as, the average Joe or regular people. He writes, above all, don't overestimate your own power as an individual. Founders are important, not because they are the only ones whose work has value, but rather because a great founder can bring out the best work from everybody at his company. That we need individual founders in all their peculiarity does not mean that we are called to worship Ayn Randian prime movers who claim to be independent of everyone around them. In this respect, Rand was merely a half-great writer. Her villains were real, but her heroes were fake. There is no Galt's Gulch. There is no secession from society. To To believe yourself invested with divine self-sufficiency is not the mark of a strong individual, but a person who has mistaken the crowd's worship or jeering for the truth. The single greatest danger for a founder is to become so certain of his own myth that he loses his mind. But an equally insidious danger for every business is to lose all sense of myth and mistake disenchantment for wisdom. So there's actually quite a bit to unpack there, but today I just want to focus on the message that despite the illusion that society tends to create with the focus on celebrities and, influencers on social media, there are no gods living among us. We are actually all human, and we all need each other. So this is a call to keep that ego in check, but also to keep the self-esteem high. The balancing act of valuing yourself and your power enough without valuing yourself and your power too much can be incredibly difficult. And I know that most of us tend to lead toward undervaluing ourselves and our power. I know I do. Now, I think we do this because we are afraid of disappointment. If you accidentally undervalue yourself and you are proven wrong, it's a nice surprise. But if you accidentally overvalue yourself and are proven wrong, you would expect this to feel disappointing or even humiliating. But I don't believe this is an accurate picture of how things really work. I think you tend to fulfill your own expectations. So if you expect that you can't really do much, you won't. But if you expect that you can do great things, you will. And if you get it wrong, if you accidentally expect something too ambitious of yourself, you still will have accomplished more than you would have if you didn't try at all. Is there a risk of negative feelings like disappointment or humiliation? Of course. But those feelings can come from a variety of life experiences, many of them completely outside of your control. So it's much more useful to be prepared to ride those waves of negative emotions than it is to try to avoid them altogether. It's the old shoot for the moon and you'll land among the stars idea. I know that phrase is a tired old cliche, so if it doesn't resonate with you, that's totally understandable. It doesn't really resonate with me either. But what does resonate with me is the idea that I have a part to play. It may not be what most people would see as a massive, impressive part, but that doesn't mean it doesn't matter, or that it won't be the catalyst for significant change. And I believe the same is true for you. You are uniquely positioned to make a positive impact on the world, and your impact matters. Even if it doesn't look very big to you, it is significant. I hope you found this helpful, and I hope you have a wonderful day. I will speak with you again on Monday.